Rest of Scotland feeling cooler here, and for much of northern and western England, Wales, cloudier conditions to begin things, although the rain on the weather front that is making the change tending to peter out, and really it's just a band of cloud and a few spots of rain as it pushes into the Midlands, and then by the afternoon East Anglia in the southeast. As that rain arrives and as the cloud thickens, the wind changes direction, temperatures aren't going to reach the highs that we saw in the last couple of days. We're looking at closer to 25, 26 Celsius in the east and southeast. But sunshine returns by the end of the day across much of England and Wales. Blustery showers in the west and the north. And as I say, unseasonably windy through Thursday, especially in the far north and northwest, and into Friday we've still got some heavy showers moving through and some strong winds that could impact any outdoor events that are taking place, and so watch out for that. Into the weekend, mixed conditions, some cloud, a bit of rain here and there, but also some sunshine, temperatures back to average.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party. Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tormini.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest headlines this hour, and a new poll has predicted that the Conservatives are set to lose most of their seats and will likely have fewer seats than the Liberal Democrats, which means, according to this new research, the Lib Dems are most likely to become the official opposition. The new poll from Electoral Calculus forecasts that Labour will win 450 seats. the Lib Dems 71 seats and the Conservatives 60. It's likely that the Reform Party will win around 18 seats, including those of Nigel Farage, Richard Tice and Lee Anderson. The forecast Labour victory would be more significant than Tony Blair's landslide election in 1997 and would be the largest win by any political party over the last 100 years, going right back to, in fact, the 1930s. Well, the two main party leaders went head-to-head tonight in another TV debate. Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak arriving at Nottingham Trent University earlier to take part. And they answered questions from an invited studio audience, with one asking how each leader was planning to control illegal immigration. We'll have full reaction to that coming up later on GB News. Now, Julian Assange says it's surreal to be back on Australian soil after his years-long struggle for freedom came to an end today. And a warning if you're watching on television, this does contain some flashing imagery. The 52-year-old WikiLeaks founder touched down in Canberra, Australia today. He was greeted by his father and his wife Stella. She says he'll need time to rediscover freedom, while his lawyer described his homecoming as a huge win for free speech. Here in the UK, NHS leaders are warning of major disruption as a result of the heat wave and the junior doctors' strike. Yellow heat health alerts are in place for many parts of the UK and throughout tomorrow, and will end 5 p.m. tomorrow, just as junior doctors across the country walk off the job over pay and working conditions. It'll be the 11th walkout by junior doctors from the British Medical Association in England. And Spanish police have released new footage in their search for the missing British teenager, Jay Slater. It shows aerial shots from a helicopter scouring the mountainous region from above. And then it shows search teams on foot below, having been joined now by sniffer dog teams as well. The Guardia Civil, the local police, saying their efforts not being scaled back by any means. The 19-year-old went missing 10 days ago whilst he was on holiday in Tenerife. And just lastly, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence says the Princess Royal is recovering slowly as he left a Bristol hospital after visiting his wife today. Princess Anne understood to have been injured by a horse while she was out walking on Sunday evening, but she suffered some memory loss as well, so the exact circumstances of what happened aren't yet known. However, doctors say she is expected to make a full recovery. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly, and hello to you at home, and welcome to a very special Patrick Christys tonight as we prepare for Sunak v Starmer, the verdict. 2 hours of thumping coverage of tonight's election debate, including highlights of all the best bits, top political analysis from the likes of Victoria Atkins, Kwasi Kwarteng and Tony Blair's ex-Defence Secretary Jeff Hoon. And of course, maybe the best bit of the show, in fact, our political editor Christopher Hope will be live as he worked his way around the official post-debate spin room. Patrick is live now with our audience in the other studio behind me. Patrick, what's going on? I heard claims of my dad was a toolmaker, protests from outside. What's going on?
Yeah, well, there have been some protests outside. There was the toolmaker comment. His dad now worked in a factory instead of actually made the tools, so there was that side of things. But yes, we are in the GB News watch room here. This has been, I think, the spiciest debate so far. It's actually been really quite entertaining. Gambling and integrity came up, benefits has come up, borders has come up. It got really quite tasty quite a few times. So we've got some great clips to play you, and this audience that you can see around me here are fired up and ready to go later on. They're going to be giving Kwasi Kwarteng a good grilling, no doubt, as well as Jeff Hoon as well. But I'm just going to ask a couple of them now, if that's all right. Sir, I'll start with you, if that's OK. Who do you think's winning for you?
Well, it seems to be a clear win for Sunak. Surprisingly so, he seems much better coached, much better structured in his answers, and keeps coming back. And Starmer's hardly landing a punch on anything.
Yeah, it has, I think it's fair to say, been probably Sunak's best performance and arguably Starmer's worst. We'll find out whether or not the people disagree with that more when we delve into this a little bit later on. So what's been one of the standout moments for you? I think you were saying that Labour have been quite good at criticising, have they?
The Labour Party is good at criticising. It's not good at giving straight answers. The issue with Slough, with Birmingham and other local authorities that have failed financially, they blame the government. They stand themselves to be blamed because ideologically Labour has always been for floodgates, for open borders. He cannot stand that now in an election and lie and say he's going to control migration when the Labour Party is ideologically open to migration.
Well, I'll be coming back to you when we go live on air, definitely. And just to say, very quickly, Ben, before I go back to you, one of the loudest cheers in that audience was when a bloke stood up and basically said, "You're both useless, why should we vote for you?" And I think that went down quite well in this room as well. Is that a joke? Right, so there we go, Ben, back to you. You're not useless and people should definitely watch.
Oh, I don't know, Patrick. There's 25 minutes left, so I may come a calamity just yet. Yeah, and also a very interesting point. Those protests from outside, pro-Palestine protests, lots of video online doing the rounds of it, but you could also hear it whilst the debate was going on, so very funny. Now, look, of course, lots going on in the election run from the last 24 hours, but not least this morning, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, he's waded into the row sparked by these comments from Doctor Who actor and lefty lovey, of course, David Tennant at the LGBT Awards. Look at this.
If I'm honest, I'm a little depressed by the fact that acknowledging that everyone has the right to be who they want to be and live their life how they want to live it, as long as they're not hurting anyone else, should merit any kind of special award or special mention, because it's common sense, isn't it? However, until we wake up and Kemi Badenoch doesn't exist anymore, I don't wish ill of her, I just wish her to shut up.
Dear, oh dear. Stunning and brave, I guess, is how the left would describe that, telling a woman to shut up. Well, look, David Tennant, a fierce, quote-unquote, ally of the LGBT community, there he is in his LGBT T-shirt. You will have to go through me, the trans flag in hand, masculinity pouring out of every part of his body, of course. Now, look, he is a fierce ally, he claims, of the LGBT community. He sparked a political row off the back of these comments about Women's and Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, this morning weighed into the debate. He said, "Freedom of speech is the most powerful feature of our democracy. If you're calling for women to shut up and wishing they didn't exist, you are the problem." Kemi Badenoch already hit back yesterday by saying this. She said, "I will not shut up. I will not be silenced by men who prioritise applause from Stonewall over the safety of women and girls. A rich, lefty, white male celebrity so blinded by ideology he can't see the optics of attacking the only black woman in government by calling publicly for my existence to end." She went on, "Keir Starmer stood by while Rosie Duffield was hounded. He and his supporters will do the same with the country. Do not let the bigots and bullies win." And that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because this is now yet another issue around women's rights that has divided the Labour Party. Dawn Butler waded in today, remember her, and backed Tennant, saying, "Not all black women think the same. I agree with David Tennant. That's it. That's the tweet." 54-year-old Dawn Butler there, by the way, tweeting like a 16-year-old. But there we go. An odd response from Miss Butler, by the way, who has spoken out about the poor treatment of black female politicians in the past. Last year, she complains that the disrespect for black women in the Commons was, quote, shocking. So does that same solidarity not stretch to Miss Badenoch in this instance? Well, I guess not. And her comments come on the same day Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting is trying to repair Labour's relationship with women, writing in the Daily Telegraph that Labour has a, quote, lot of work to do to earn the trust of women in the wake of rows about transgender rights. So I wonder, it's interesting, isn't it? I wonder how he feels about Dawn Butler's comments, especially as Tennant only really took aim at Badenoch in the first place because of her common-sense views on trans rights. Badenoch fired back at Butler again today, saying, "This is the true face of the Labour Party. Keir Starmer says he doesn't want a toxic debate, but he's very happy to have Labour MPs do his dirty work for him and let people know they wish I didn't exist. These are the types of people who will form a government if Labour wins, if they win. The toxicity of the debate comes from the left. It always has." So what do you think? Is she right that the toxicity of the debate always comes from the left? And, by the way, are Labour just too divided on trans rights to protect women effectively? But let's get the thoughts of my panel now. Businessman and activist Adam Brooks, author and journalist Rebecca Reed. And Adam, I have a feeling you're not going to be on the fence on this one when it comes to Dawn Butler and the alleged hypocrisy, and also the trans debate. We're back here again.
Look, let's start with Dawn Butler. She's a famous anti-racist that was basically effectively racist towards brown Tory MPs. She said of Suella Braverman that she wouldn't be Home Secretary if she was white. She also dismissed Priti Patel's experiences of lived racism. So what is she? You know, is it OK to sort of denounce racism as long as it isn't against Tory MPs of colour? That's what it comes across. It's total hypocrisy. And then we've got David Tennant. You know, this lovey thespian.
What did you make of that picture of him, by the way, with the you'll have to go through me first, with his trans flag in hand?
It makes me feel sick.
And yet he tops the polls of men that women find sexiest again and again and again.
You're speaking to the wrong women.
It's absolutely true, 100%. No, honestly, objective polls on the internet show women love him.
Do you think he? I mean, which way? What modern man would be the Twitter?
I would say that he is.
Do you think this is you know, a masculine, strong man to look up to?
Yes, absolutely. He's a step-parent to a trans child, which I think is an extraordinary and incredible. One of his children, I don't know whether it's a stepchild or his biological child, but one of them is trans. He is a very talented, very attractive, very wealthy, very successful, multi-award-winning actor who women absolutely go for. But if we're going to talk about hypocrisy, the one I'd really like to get in on is Kemi, because Kemi has said, word for word, I don't like identity politics. She has said, I don't like it when people are tribal. I don't like it when people talk about being a woman or being black, like it's important. And then today, here she is saying, don't be mean to me, I'm the only black woman in the government.
She's sticking up for herself.
But if identity politics aren't relevant, why is she bringing up identity politics? Either we all can or no one can, but it sounds to me like Kemi's like, identity politics don't exist unless someone's being mean to me and then they're OK.
No, she's being attacked and she's sticking up for herself.
But she's using identity politics. Do you disagree?
But
she's saying, I'm the only black woman in the cabinet.
Let's remind the audience of what Kemi Badenoch is trying to do. She is trying to protect women's only spaces from biological men. 95% of trans women plus still have their penis. I've got 2 daughters. I do not want men like Eddie Izzard, who one day says that he's a woman, sticks on a short skirt, a little bit of lippy, and goes into women's toilets and women's changing rooms.
If you care about protecting women and girls...
What Kemi Badenoch is doing
is
she's trying to protect women-only spaces and women's sports. We know there's a problem, and I think anyone that disagrees with trying to protect these has got an ulterior agenda.
Anybody who cares about equality should have mentioned that the maternal death rate in childbirth has gone up over the last 5 years.
But it's a slightly different issue.
It's a completely different issue.
If you are in charge of making life better for women, why is the only thing you talk about trans rights? Why do you not talk about other things like employment, like flexible working, like the cost of childcare, like the fact that women are dying in childbirth, like the fact that black women are 4 times more likely to experience birth injury? Where is that information?
For the record, Kemi Badenoch has done a lot of work on that, particularly in 2020, 2021 as well. But on the issue of Kemi herself...
It's gone up since 2021.
Rebecca,
she hasn't addressed it since 2020.
Are you a fan of Kemi Badenoch, no?
No, absolutely
What's your issue with her stance on trans?
I think that it's more about the fact that she doesn't like being told that she couldn't or shouldn't say things than actually caring about trans rights, because before it became a political hot potato, there's very little record of her saying anything. In fact, previously, she was fairly lax on pride issues.
It's argued, Adam, though, that she's only saying things the majority of normal, common-sense thinking people
What does that mean? Where do you get that data from?
Why should biological men compete in women's sports?
OK, that's a very, very big question, generally speaking.
It's very easy. A lot of people would argue it's easy.
In contact sports, unless somebody has been on hormone suppressants since childhood, I don't think it's appropriate in full contact sports. In non-contact sports, or if somebody has transitioned in puberty, pre-pubescent, and they don't have the muscle density, I don't have an issue with it.
So you think a biological male who sprints is okay competing against...
Did they go through male puberty?
Yes.
Then no, I don't think that.
OK. Adam?
I don't know anyone that thinks this is right. And I'm telling you now, if I went to any high street in this country with a microphone and asked everyone that walked past for a few hours whether or not biological men should be in women's toilets, safe spaces and sports, 98% would agree with me.
You just made up a number. You just made up a statistic. There are lots of polls that show that lots of people think that trans people should be allowed to live their life with quiet dignity and privacy.
Look, this is how you spin it and the left spin it. I believe in trans rights. What I don't believe is that biological men should be in women's toilets and women's sports. I can say trans should have rights. But what rights don't trans have that everyone else has?
Okay, well,
I think in this specific debate, people are trying to roll back from the rights to easily gender reassign and use the bottom.
It's been argued that Kemi Badenoch is just trying to push forward things with the shake-up of the Equality Act that most people think are sensible. No biological men in women's sports, biological sex considered as a characteristic.
And no mention of anything else that impacts women.
And also,
just
by the way,
trans stuff.
regardless of anything else, David Tennant, you know, just telling a woman to shut up because she doesn't want them to exist.
So you do believe in identity politics, then? You can tell women to shut up, or you can't tell women
I don't think it's a good look to tell women to shut up.
So you have to treat women differently from men. Why?
Well, why?
Why do you treat...
It's just being a gracious male. You don't hit women. You don't tell women to shut up. There's certain ways that you treat.
You shouldn't
women.
hit anyone.
And Ben, let's just remember, if a right-wing actor had said this to someone like Diane Abbott, it would be screened as racism.
What, like that nice
and the
Tory
Daily
party
Mirror
donor who's
Daily
still
Mirror
giving
would have it on the
money?
front page.
Okay, great start. Adam
Frank
Brooks.
Hester, anyone?
Rebecca Reid, thank you very much. Moving on swiftly, don't forget, on election night next week, GB News will be live in Essex as Michelle Dewberry and Patrick Christys host our exclusive coverage as the polls draw to a close. So, if you want to be part of our live audience in Essex with Patrick and Jubes, apply now by either scanning the QR code on screen or visiting gbnews.com. If you don't know how to scan the QR code, get your mobile phone out now, get the camera out, put the camera over the QR code, and there should be a little link, especially on iPhones, where you can click and sign up. It's going to be a very exciting night. Right, coming up tonight, Patrick returns with his live studio audience as we bring you exclusive reaction to Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer's final head-to-head in the election campaign. He'll be joined by former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins, former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, and ex-Labour Minister Jeff Hoon, who was Tony Blair's former Defence Secretary. But up next, we hear from a Conservative activist who has suffered a worrying amount of anti-Semitic abuse on the campaign trail. Is the left's fanatical support of Palestine to blame? And we saw it again tonight in the debate, the pro-Palestine mob outside Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer's head-to-head a bit earlier. Don't go anywhere. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
We're very lucky to have an heir to the throne who is dutiful, loves his family, and he still takes all the children to school in the morning. And you can't really hope for anything more than that, can you? And he's behaved with such dignity. He must be so worried about his father and his lovely wife.
I wonder what the royals are going to do if the next generation of people aren't armed forces, if they don't join the army or the navy or the air force or whatever.
This is very interesting because Prince William doesn't necessarily want little George to do that. He doesn't feel it's necessary. But it's such a stamp on the royal family, isn't it? And with all the costumes, and they're the head of the army. And so what would they do without that? I find that very difficult. I think it's the same with religion, actually, because he's not religious, William. He does go once or twice a year, but he hasn't got the same passion about religion that King Charles does. And I think it's very difficult. I think it'll be maybe a very changed royal family.
Indeed, yeah. We don't know yet who's going to be attending Royal Ascot, but we suspect at the very least the Queen, probably the King and Queen, and maybe even the Prince of Wales as well.
You can't keep the Queen away from horses. I mean, she absolutely loves them. She used to ride them non-stop when she was little. And fascinatingly, her mother never bothered about it because they weren't mobiles then. And she would go off riding for hours and sleep in a field.
Life. What an incredible
and then
childhood.
come back the next day. She never worried about her. She thought she was sensible. She loves animals, dogs and horses. That's one of the things she had very much in common with the late Queen.
The People's Channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you.
we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides.
As you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
The People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, just for another 10 minutes or so. Now, the final leaders' showdown of the election campaign is approaching, and Patrick has been watching it in our live studio with a live audience, by the way, of GB News viewers, so you don't have to. Patrick, you've got your fizzy pop, your snacks, your sausage rolls. I hope you're not stuffing your face there. How's it going?
No, I have not been eating anything myself so far. It's a bit like Gogglebox this, but I do thoroughly enjoy it. It's my favourite kind of show. And like you said, Ben, we're watching this so you at home don't have to, and we'll have all of that kind of fizzing debate afterwards. We'll be in the spin room, we'll be with a load of front benchers, but these are the people that really matter. Now, it has just got incredibly spicy on the issue of women's spaces, OK? The audience were going at them here. It drew quite a lot of reaction in this room, and Keir Starmer wasn't really answering what he would do to protect women's spaces. Rishi Sunak was hammering him on that. And I'm just going to go quickly to a couple of the ladies in the room, just ask you, who do you think he's going to trust, based on what you've just heard there, who do you trust more with to protect women's spaces?
Sunak. I think he will. I've got 4 daughters. So I'm very keen on that one.
OK, so it means a lot to you?
Yeah, very much to me.
OK.
I like my children to go somewhere, being they are female, to feel free.
Rishi Sunak did actually get quite emotional when he was talking about his own daughters there. To contrast that, Keir Starmer just started naming women who were in his party, which I thought was quite a bit weird, really. But how do you feel when it comes to protecting women's spaces? Where are you on it?
Sunak, because at least he knows what a woman is.
Well, Ben, I'm going to throw it back to you, but one thing I will say is we are going to have a great show from 9:30, and I can't wait for it, so I'll see you then.
Thanks, Pat. Save me a few of those snacks as well, because you're returning in a few short minutes to react to the live BBC debate that I think is just about to finish. But first, listen to this. A Conservative campaigner claims to have been subjected to sickening anti-Semitic abuse while out campaigning in Birmingham. So Michael Rowe, he's a parliamentary assistant and campaigner for the Tories, who also serves as the chair of the Young National Jewish Assembly. He was told by a woman that, quote, Jews are not welcome here. That's as he leafleted a quiet street in his Brum hometown. The incident has been reported to West Midlands Police. We've got a comment from them in just a tick. But this comes after anti-Semitic hate crime incidents in Britain hit a record high, rising by 589%, a whopping number, after Hamas attacked Israel in October last year. So, Michael, welcome to the show. Good evening. Just explain to me what happened. How far into the campaign trail were you? What kind of street was it? And also, what was the woman like? Can you give us a description?
Yeah, good evening, Ben. Thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to speak to you. As you say, I was campaigning on a quiet street in Birmingham. It was not a particularly busy time of the day when I was leafleting. A lady then approached me from her house. She'd actually just driven into the close, and she asked me why I was there, to which I responded, I'm delivering election literature, which, of course, we all know everyone is free to do in this country. It's a great strength of our democracy.
Of course.
The lady then responded, well, you're not welcome here, to which I responded, well, why not? And she said, because you're Jewish. So it was completely explicit in what she said. She used anti-Semitism. She used that explicitly on the streets of Britain. I think it's a growing problem. As you say, since the 7th of October, it's only got worse. And this problem is continuing to escalate, and we're seeing it across the country.
So, Michael, how did she know you were Jewish? First question.
So she can identify that by the skull cap that I wear on my head.
Right.
So just should say for context that I've worn that for a long time all around the country, all different events. And I have to say, I've never experienced anything like this before. But since the 7th of October, these attacks and these types of racial slurs and racial insults are ever increasing, and it's a big problem.
Was she a white woman, a black woman? What does she look like?
She was a white, middle-aged lady. As I say, never met her before, didn't have any reason to come across, so I wasn't even looking to speak to her because it was only a letter that I was delivering. I wasn't even knocking on her door to speak to her about the election, and she then felt it was appropriate to use that slur against me.
Well, look, sorry you went through that, but I mean, of course, we saw the stat in the introduction there, nearly 600% rise in anti-Semitic hate crimes. I'm not sure if you were watching the debate earlier between Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, but there was yet another pro-Palestine mob outside. You could hear them in the studio. Do you blame this kind of incident you went through, the horrible behaviour you were subjected to, on this pro-Palestine movement that we've seen since, October, since Hamas attacked Israel?
Yes, I mean, anti-Semitism has unfortunately always been a problem, and it's not looking likely it's going to go away anytime soon. But since the Hamas attacks, the terrorist attacks of the 7th of October, where innocent civilians obviously were murdered in cold blood, we have seen a massive increase in anti-Semitism. And I have to say, the pro-Palestinian rallies are making things even worse. Now, obviously, everyone has the right to freedom of expression, to democracy. Everyone has the right to protest in our country. That does not mean everyone has the right to insult other people. And I've seen for myself that I wouldn't want to walk into pro-Palestinian marches that I've seen as I leave work in the centre of London on almost a weekly basis. And it's absolutely disgraceful.
Michael, very sorry you went through that. It's disgusting, it's vile, and I'm sure, most normal thinking people would condemn it completely. Please don't let it put you off campaigning, because, as you said, politics, from whatever side of the argument you're on, is the cornerstone of our democracy. So please carry on, and we hope, you aren't subjected to any more vile behaviour like that in the future. When we did contact the police earlier today, West Midlands told us a 24-year-old man was delivering leaflets on Elm Road in Birmingham on the morning of 23rd of June when he reported being verbally abused. The victim reported the incident to us on Tuesday, the 25th of June, and we've launched an investigation. We're treating the incident as a hate crime. OK, right, up next, Patrick returns with his live studio audience. Kwasi Kwarteng's here as well. Jeff Hoon, who's Tony Blair's former Defence Secretary, Victoria Atkins, the former Health Minister, and more, as we bring you Sunak v Starmer, the verdict. Don't go anywhere. I'll see you next week. Patrick is back in a tick. Have a good night.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following another hot day for many, it's warm overnight, but cooler air is on the way and windier weather. This unseasonably deep low pressure arriving for Thursday and Friday, that's going to bring some unseasonable strong winds to Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, it's not been hot everywhere during Wednesday, but for much of central and southeastern England, it has been another very warm or hot one, and it's going to stay warm in these areas overnight despite the clear spells. 17 Celsius. Further west and north, we've got showery rain moving in, cloud and an increased breeze. So by dawn, much more unsettled across parts of Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the winds picking up strength through the morning, bands of rain moving into the west coast. We've also got some heavy showers pushing through the Northern Isles, perhaps the odd rumble of thunder. Brighter skies for much of the rest of Scotland, feeling cooler here. And for much of northern and western England, Wales, cloudier conditions to begin things, although the rain on the weather front that is making the change tending to peter out, and really it's just a band of cloud and a few spots of rain as it pushes into the Midlands, and then by the afternoon East Anglia in the southeast. As that rain arrives and as the cloud thickens, the wind changes direction, temperatures aren't going to reach the highs that we saw in the last couple of days. We're looking at closer to 25, 26 Celsius in the east and southeast. But sunshine returns by the end of the day across much of England and Wales. Blustery showers in the west and the north. And as I say, unseasonably windy through Thursday, especially in the far north and northwest, and into Friday we've still got some heavy showers moving through and some strong winds that could impact any outdoor events that are taking place, and so watch out for that. Into the weekend, mixed conditions, some cloud, a bit of rain here and there, but also some sunshine, temperatures back to average.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following another hot day for many, it's warm overnight, but cooler air is on the way and windier weather. This unseasonably deep low pressure arriving for Thursday and Friday, that's going to bring some unseasonable strong winds to Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, it's not been hot everywhere during Wednesday, but for much of central and southeastern England, it has been another very warm or hot one, and it's going to stay warm in these areas overnight despite the clear spells, 17 Celsius. Further west and north, we've got showery rain moving in, cloud and an increased breeze. So by dawn, much more unsettled across parts of Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the winds picking up strength through the morning, bands of rain moving into the west coast. We've also got some heavy showers pushing through the Northern Isles, perhaps the odd rumble of thunder. Brighter skies for much of the rest of Scotland, feeling cooler here. And for much of northern and western England, Wales, cloudier conditions to begin things, although the rain on the weather front that is making the change tending to peter out, and really it's just a band of cloud and a few spots of rain as it pushes into the Midlands, and then by the afternoon East Anglia in the southeast. As that rain arrives and as the cloud thickens, the wind changes direction, temperatures aren't going to reach the highs that we saw in the last couple of days. We're looking at closer to 25, 26 Celsius in the east and southeast. But sunshine returns by the end of the day across much of England and Wales. Blustery showers in the west and the north. And as I say, unseasonably windy through Thursday, especially in the far north and northwest. And into Friday, we've still got some heavy showers moving through and some strong winds that could impact any outdoor events that are taking place. And so watch out for that. Into the weekend, mixed conditions, some cloud, a bit of rain here and there, but also some sunshine, temperatures back to average.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Oh, brilliant stuff. I absolutely love this. Welcome back, everybody. Now, it is time for the main event with, as you can tell, our live studio audience. This is Sunak versus Starmer, the verdict. So, for the past hour or so, my wonderful audience and I have been sat together watching Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer come to blows in a feisty televised debate for the final time. Mr Sunak, he came out swinging.
Well, do you know where these people come from?
No, he's not answering the question.
Do you know where
you
they
can
come
see
from?
that.
Iran,
you can see.
Syria, Afghanistan. So when Keir Starmer says he's going to return people, is he going to sit down? Are you going to sit down with the Iranian Ayatollahs? Are you going to try and do a deal with the Taliban? It's completely nonsensical what you are saying, right?
But the Labour leader came back. He tried to land a few blows of his own.
You literally opposed it.
If you listen to people in the audience across the country more often, you might not be quite so out of touch. Beverly.
And I think we might have found one man who managed to capture the mood of the nation.
Mr Sunak, I think you made a fair job of being Chancellor, but you're a pretty mediocre Prime Minister. Sir Keir, I think that your strings are being pulled by very senior members of the Labour Party. Are you two really the best we've got to be the next Prime Minister of our great country?
Yes, to which there was rapturous applause, I must say, in our watch room there, the sense of desperation. But I'm joined, as you can tell, by my live studio audience. They're ready and raring to go, and they're going to be very shortly grilling former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, who's here with us right now, and former Labour Minister Jeff Hoon. Before we go to Christopher Hope, who's in the spin room for us with some political high flyers, Kwasi, I'll start with you.
Sure.
That was, I think, Rishi Sunak's best performance. He had his foot on Starmer's throat. He kept asking him, what's your plan?
I thought he was very good. I thought he was very fluent on the economy. He said that the inflation had gone down considerably. He kept hammering Labour, Starmer on taxes. And you could see Keir was not very comfortable. He kept wincing and he looked very tetchy when Rishi was attacking him on that. And I thought that Rishi was very fluent and he was very engaged and animated. So I thought it was a good debate for him.
I think the question is whether or not that's a bit too little too late, unfortunately, for Rishi Sunak. Jeff, I'll ask you, so Rishi came out on women's spaces, he came out on taxation, he came out on the small boats, he came out on the returns agreements. Keir Starmer didn't seem to have too much of an answer for that, did he? Is he a bit of a dud?
I thought the Prime Minister reminded me of some sixth form debaters I encountered at university, constantly talking across Keir Starmer, whereas Keir Starmer was calm, collected, very thoughtful, set out his position very clearly when he was allowed to, and he wasn't being talked over by the Prime Minister. Astonishing behaviour for a Prime Minister, really.
So, look, I mean, I get where you're coming from, but he's 20 points behind in the polls? We can all see the polls. He's got to do something. He can't just sit back and be calm and regal. He's got to engage, and I thought he did that very effectively today.
But the key thing about what was going on there was that Keir Starmer was setting out a very clear picture of what he believed he could do. Whereas we then got a Prime Minister who's been in power, his party's been in power for 14 years, saying what he wanted to do, even though none of the things that he talked about he's actually done whilst he's been in power.
He'd done a few things, but I get what you're saying, but I thought he had a very coherent answer, particularly on economic issues, which is obviously very fluent.
All right. Guys, we will come back to you. I can't wait to get the audience involved, but before that, we cross live now to the spin room where GBNews' political editor Christopher Hope is right in amongst it. Christopher, tell me what you got.
Hi, Patrick. Well, I thought that was a very interesting debate. I think the PM there, Rishi Sunak, came out fighting in a way we haven't heard yet. He asked 8 times, I think it was, what will you do about illegally arrived people by small boats here? No answer really from Sir Keir Starmer. And the word surrender was used in different ways. Surrender our borders, surrender the welfare bill, surrender the taxation to Labour. Now, that word surrender is fascinating to me. It's a word I think that resonates maybe with Reform UK voters. We've got the MRP polling out tonight showing that Reform UK are going to do very well in the election, according to electoral calculus, and find out now next week. So I think you saw a real appeal there from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, to Reform UK voters not to go and try and wreck it all and back and vote Reform and split the Tory vote. I thought that was fascinating. Also, I was struck by the way that Sir Keir Starmer often thought of as a kind of judge's barrister, not a jury barrister, just kept appealing for silence. Please let me finish, he begged of the young whippersnapper Rishi Sunak. I think he had his best day, no question, or best night of the campaign, I think, taking on Sir Keir Starmer. The question he's got is anyone listening?
Christopher, thank you very, very much. Now, I believe that Christopher there is going to be grabbing people left, right and centre. So what we're going to do is we are going to continually be whipping you back and forth into that spin room. I'm just going to play you another quick clip of this debate so far. This was about the question of borders and illegal immigration.
The government has effectively lost control of our borders. And that means it's not just a border security issue, it's actually a national security issue because the government's lost control of who's coming and what their background is.
We need to make it crystal clear to people that if they come to our country illegally, they won't be able to stay. And that's why, if I'm your Prime Minister on July 5th, the flights will go to Rwanda. We will build that deterrent that multiple other European countries now agree is the right way to deal with this problem, and that's how we solve this problem. What will you do with the illegal migrants that arrive to the UK? What will you do with them? You've had 3 weeks to think of an answer. What is it?
OK, all right, now we have my wonderful studio audience in here. I'll go to a specific question in a second. I just want to, just by a show of hands, if that's all right, first, who you think is going to stop illegal immigration, who's going to be better at dealing with illegal immigration. So if you think that is the Labour Party, can people maybe raise some hands for me? Not a sausage. Right, OK. If people think that's going to be Rishi Sunak, yeah, OK. Could we put hands up if anyone thinks that Nigel Farage might do a better job than both of them, out of interest? OK, all right, fair enough. I mean, I think it goes without saying. For our radio listeners, Keir Starmer did not win, so there we go. Right, my friend on the front row here, now what is your question about? And I'll get you both to respond to this, so go on, sir.
So, as a disabled person, who do you think I'll be better voting for?
OK, lovely question, great start. As a disabled person, who do you think you'd be better voting for? Go on, Jeff.
I think the Labour Party has had a consistent and strong history on supporting all of the people in our society who need help. And I've always thought in politics the difference between Labour and the Conservative Party was that Labour essentially puts people first, the Conservative Party puts business first. And essentially, over the history of this country, it has always been the Labour Party that's helped people in your position.
So I obviously disagree with Jeff. I think when we look at benefits, we've always protected benefits for disabled people. And I didn't agree with him with his premise on business and people. I mean, who makes up the business? Who works in businesses? This idea that you can somehow put business opposing people's interests, I think, is crazy. And I think it's one of the big problems we have as a society. We've got to try and encourage business people. We've got to try and encourage small business people so that we can grow the economy. And I think that's fundamentally actually how Labour get it wrong. They think the two are different.
Well, we had a key dividing line drawn up, and this was, I think, quite apparent to all of us who were watching in there when they were asked about benefits. What are we going to do with it? There were two questions, really, on benefits. One was specifically focused on disabled people. Another one was focused on people who just aren't in work, OK? And basically, Rishi Sunak seemed to say he wanted to make it tougher for people to sign on, I think, implying that there are too many people, he thinks, who are on the take, right? And Keir Starmer, I think, was taking the quotes-unquote more compassionate approach, wasn't he? And said, I want to get them all off NHS waiting lists so they can get back into work. So there was a clear dividing line on all of that. I think we might have a little clip, actually, just to remind ourselves of this welfare issue. So let's play that.
You are going to have higher welfare under you, and that's why you can't deliver tax cuts the way that I can. And people should not surrender to this.
The Prime Minister says he's going to do all these things. They've been in power for 14 years. Why has he only just thought of this with a week to go before the general election?
Well, you want to be in charge, but you've got nothing to say to people about what you would do about it. This election is about the future.
Just as a very quick show of hands again, do people in this room think that there are too many people claiming benefits who shouldn't be claiming benefits? Do you think there are too many people on the take? Does anyone think that the NHS waiting lists are to blame? No? OK, all right, a bit of both. I said a bit of both. Sir, on the front row here, what's your question to these two esteemed gentlemen we have here?
Well, I'm happy to see Kwasi here, and I'm quite sad that he actually isn't in a senior cabinet position anymore. I think this country, from an economic perspective, particularly someone that has a degree in economics and finance and works in the industry, I think far too much blame was pinned on sort of what you guys laid out while you were Chancellor, LDIs and QT from the Bank of England, that sort of stuff. But this country has radical economic problems and it requires radical solutions, Where's the planning reform which would have transformational effects to the economy? OBR are way off with their forecasts. Why are we doing these fiscal rules 5 years forward? And things like cheaper energy. The Falklands has 33 trillion worth of oil on it. Cheap energy is highly correlated with economic growth. And why should I vote for Labour or Tories on this front? I don't want reheated, stale ideas. I want radical solutions. This country has to get a kick up the arse.
OK, fair enough. Strong stuff. Strong, come on.
Thank you for your words. I mean, you've got to admit where things went wrong. I think we went too fast, too soon. But I'm very interested in the debate because, as you say, what we need is to drive growth. We need an economy that's growing at 2 and 2.5% a year, not an economy that's growing 0.5%. And I'm very interested because a lot of what Liz Truss is saying in terms of the growth, imperative for growth, Labour are saying the same thing. They're saying we need to have growth. They get that. Because if we don't grow the economy, all they'll do is put up taxes. And that's why Rishi's attack on them is so effective.
OK.
Because he knows that.
Jeff, what's Labour going to do to give our economy a kick up the backside?
Well, bear in mind that Kwasi's budget, Liz Truss supervised that budget and was equally responsible, caused every person in this room who's paying a mortgage to pay more money.
That's
and
not true. It's the Bank of it. It was related. It's related.
They are still paying
that's a
more
huge
in
lie.
their mortgage
because
every
the bank
month.
rate.
Let me finish. I listened to you, Kwasi.
No, OK, I'll let you finish. And then I'll come back to you. Because it's nonsense. What you're saying is not true.
That budget caused the pound to sink to its lowest value against a dollar ever in history. It caused the bond market absolute chaos. The Bank of England had to step in, spending your money, taxpayers' money, on sorting out the chaos that he and Liz Truss left this country. Chaos that you're still paying for if you have a mortgage, because interest rates went up as a result of the intervention by the bank, and interest rates have stayed high, higher than they need to be, higher than in other countries, because of the disaster that the Conservative government worked on this country.
Regardless of the budget, that is a lie, because I think it's a naked lie.
It's not a lie.
Let me finish.
I don't accuse you of lying.
Right, stop for a second, and I will absolutely come back to you on... No, but I've got
the mortgages were related to the bank rate, and every central bank in the Western world was hiking up interest rates
not as high
at the same time. And it's exactly what happened.
Not as high as the UK.
And it wasn't to do with
Got to go back to Christys, I hope. He's got Victoria Atkins, and then we will obviously revisit this massive row. So, go on.
Happy to do that.
Patrick, welcome back to the Spin Room. I'm with Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary. Victoria Atkins, who won?
Rishi Sunak. I think he showed tonight both the seriousness of the choice we all have to make in a week's time. This isn't a by-election, it's not a fanciful exercise. This is who will govern our country over the next 5 years, at a time that we know the world is an increasingly dangerous place. And crucially, Rishi set out our plans for the future, including on taxation, including on the economy, including on immigration. Sir Keir Starmer could not answer questions when they were put to him. He was asked 9 times what he would do to tackle immigration. He had no answer, and that, I'm afraid, shows that the mask is beginning to slip, because Labour in this election campaign have relied on a lack of scrutiny, being vague about their promises, but tonight we saw he could not answer those questions when they were put to him, and that should worry us all, because we know that with Labour's vagueness on policy, it also means that we will be the ones paying for it. So if you can afford Labour, I'm very pleased for you, but for the rest of us, we need to start saving, if God forbid, if there's a Labour government.
Where on earth has that Rishi Sunak been? It's week 6 now of this campaign, and he came out like he had like 10 Weetabix for breakfast. What's happened to him? Why has he suddenly been transformed into this attack dog? Because he did make Sir Keir Starmer look quite sleepy, and at one point Sir Keir Starmer was saying, let me finish, and a couple of times he appealed for some support from the audience or from the presenter, Michelle Hussein.
Well, this is the Rishi Sunak, that sharpness, that wit, that intellect, that's the Rishi Sunak that I see around the cabinet table, and I'm really pleased that tonight we've seen how he deploys his incredible intellect to our benefit when he's negotiating, for example, the Windsor Framework. And by the way, Sir Keir Starmer, free movement very much is on the table for the EU if we try to go back to renegotiate.
He denied that, Sir Keir Starmer.
But Michel Barnier this week said that free movement would be a requirement of any negotiation in the EU. He's obviously not been keeping up with the news.
That language on surrendering your tax rises, surrendering welfare, surrendering the border, why use the word surrender so much? Who are you trying to appeal to?
Because we believe fundamentally the choices that we have to make next Thursday is between the Conservatives that want to lower our taxes, want to lower immigration, that we have plans in place to do so. We want a bright future for our NHS. You can imagine I'm working flat out on that. But with the Labour Party, they have produced a 135-page manifesto that was a wonderful exercise in vagueness. They didn't really.
But the language surrender. But the language surrender is interesting. Why that language surrender?
Because we genuinely believe this choice on Thursday it's not as I said at the beginning, it's not a fanciful exercise. This will determine the future of our country, the direction of our country, and our government. And the Conservatives have have a plan for our future in a way that Labour, the cracks are beginning to show now.
Vicky Atkins, I've got to ask you about the doctor strike. Starts tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. It's so hard for people waiting for treatment. It's on you. Why are you not sorting this problem out? It's a big pay rise, but people are in pain because of your policies.
Well, I came in November, and since then I've sorted agreements with consultants and with specialty doctors. The last group of doctors remaining is junior doctors. They walk out on me. Labour say, we'll get into the room. I've been in the room with the doctors repeatedly, the Junior Doctors Committee, and they walk out. We know that what they are asking for is unreasonable for the taxpayer. It will cost £3 billion. So again, how is Labour going to fund that if they're going to meet that 35% pay rise that junior doctors are wanting? And what I want to do is, I've throughout said to Junior Doctors Committee, they call off these strikes. If they put patients first rather than their pay, then I will get straight back round the negotiating table with them once the election is over.
Victoria Atkins, Health Secretary. Victoria Atkins, thank you for that. Patrick, do you want a quick look around the spin room just for 2 seconds?
Yeah, go on then, Chopper, do it.
OK, here we go. This is where all the action taking place now. You'll see here, that, to my right here, John, look over here. This is the Labour attempt at spinning tomorrow's headlines. Pat McFadden there, stroking his chin. John Ashworth, I think they're trying to brief journalists, trying to convince them that Sir Keir Starmer has won this debate. Some would say not. Come this way, John, this way. I'm going to fall over. Sorry, forgive me. And this is where you're seeing Wes Streeting, Channel 4, Gary Gibbon. The BBC is here. That's Gary. That's Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, trying to brief there with the BBC, and we go around this way, John, round here. You'll see here the BBC coverage there live on BBC One now, and over here you're seeing the Sky TV operation behind me. So it's a busy time here. I think this is the last spin room we're going to have to show you here, Patrick, and this may be the place where the headlines are written tomorrow morning.
Absolutely, Christopher. Thank you very much, and we will be going back to Christopher Hope there as soon as possible. One of the big criticisms that Rishi Sunak was levelling at Keir Starmer throughout this debate was, you haven't got a plan, you haven't got a plan, you haven't got a plan, and that's because you keep changing your mind on exactly what it is you think. Quick clip now of that.
But the choice of this election is about, as Sue said, it's about leadership, it's about integrity in politics, and that's a question about doing what you say. You know, Keir Starmer's made this broader point, but the point is, he's changed his mind on every major position that he's taken. Absolutely. He doesn't have the...
Lovely stuff. Now, I'm going to go to the microphone here. My friend on the front row here. What's your question to these two individuals?
Yeah, as an unpaid carer, that both parties say that we're the backbone of the country, in all the debates, I'm appalled that none of the main parties, Labour and Conservative, have done or said anything for unpaid carers. And your only answer, it seems to be for people who are vulnerable or disabled, is to get them into work. Not all of them can get into work. You know, what are you going to do?
Okay.
That's all. There's millions being saved in money every year by unpaid carers, and you just seem to ignore us.
OK, go on then. Go on.
So I think what you do and what people do as unpaid carers, of course, is hugely important. I mean, I've just stepped down from my constituency, but I used to go every week and see care homes, and we could see how much they were contributing. People like yourself were contributing to the local community, and that's very important to us. I agree with you about the debate. I think the debates that we've seen are very narrow. Clearly, Rishi Sunak wants to talk about the economy because that's what he's very good at. And then, of course, Labour have their talking points. And I thought the debate was actually incredibly narrow and sterile, and I wish we could talk about broader issues. But in terms of what you contribute, I think we're trying to protect budgets, but we're trying to also make sure that the spending is more efficient. And that's the balance that we're trying to...
you talk about that balance, and you presume... Well, I mean, is there any money for the kind of thing that Labour wants to do? I mean, he couldn't answer even whether or not he was going to have a retirement tax today, Keir Starmer.
Well, can I go back to the question, first of all? Yeah, sure. And I don't think it's about care homes. It's about the numbers of people who give up their work, right, give up huge amounts of their time to care for loved ones, to care for people in their own home, actually saving the country, I recognise, enormous amounts of money, right, because otherwise those people would have to go to homes, they'd have to be supported by the state. So no one will go further than I would in admiring the effort you make and people like you make on behalf of those that they care for most of all. How we find money to support you is a challenge. I'm not pretending it's easy to do. There is money already in the social security system. It's not enough. It's not enough to give you the kind of help that you need to do the invaluable work that you do. Okay. So I recognise that this is a huge issue. Getting some people back into work is going to help. Okay. It's going to reduce the level of welfare spending. Getting people off the waiting list is going to help. Getting people early treatment is going to help. But I recognise that it is a fundamental issue for actually millions of people across the country. Millions carers and those who are being cared for. That's right.
I'm just going to say on this now, because I'm just getting this in my ear, that apparently the YouGov Snap poll has just come out about who the public think did better. Apparently that poll is 50-50, which I don't think many people... Do you agree with that, sir? Who do you think won? Who do you think was a better performer for you, sir? The woman?
Starmer massively won that.
You thought Keir Starmer won?
Yeah.
Yeah, OK.
Oh, sorry, no.
No. That's not what you were saying to me before.
No, Rishi won that by miles. It was like Starmer was backed into the corner. He didn't know the blows were coming from everywhere.
OK.
So he just... cried. At one point, I thought he was going to cry.
Yeah, OK, fair enough. Have you got a very quick question you'd like to put to either of these two chaps here?
Yes, it was actually about the NHS. So we have thousands of people qualify each year in the NHS, but they go into their jobs and very quickly they move on to private healthcare. What initiative could we do to stop them from leaving the NHS? Because obviously that would help bring down waiting lists if that is the problem with the jobs. But there is obviously a key issue there with GPs. We are short of them across the country.
Sure. Look, I think that, I mean, I've spoken to people at the Royal College of Nursing about this, and I actually learnt more about it when I came out of government as a backbencher than I was when I was a minister, because I was never really involved in the health department. But clearly, when I speak to nurses, I think we've got to train our people better. It's got to be recognised, particularly nursing as a profession. And I think we need to be able to have an apprenticeship and actually encourage people to go into the profession, because, as you say, morale levels are quite low, and people find that they can get better jobs in the private sector. I don't think it's a question of money. I think it's about status, it's about professional development, and also bringing people on who can then have fulfilling long-term careers. In the service.
You've got about 30 seconds, I'm afraid.
Kwasi has just done what I was describing the Prime Minister doing in the debate. What he's talking about is something that the Conservative government for 14 years could have addressed. Why is morale so low in the health service? Why are nurses leaving? Why are doctors going to other countries? Because they don't feel valued by this government. And what we need is a government that actually puts the NHS front and centre. More doctors, more nurses, more caring.
OK, right, look, we are going to return to this. We're going to have a little quick break. We're going to go to the bulletins as well, just keep you updated, because there is apparently some other news out there, although I refuse to believe that. This is more entertaining than anything I've done for a while. But look, stay tuned. I'll be back with you in just a second.
It's the final week to see how you can win big this summer. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to a very special edition of Patrick Christys tonight. I have a live studio audience in here with me for Sunak versus Starmer, the verdict. Shall we have a little quick recap? OK, so immigration and our broken borders, they were massive talking points again.
The government has effectively lost control of our borders. And that means it's not just a border security issue, it's actually a national security issue because the government's lost control of who's coming and what their background is.
We need to make it crystal clear to people that if they come to our country illegally, they won't be able to stay. And that's why, if I'm your Prime Minister on July 5th, the flights will go to Rwanda. We will build that deterrent that multiple other European countries now agree is the right way to deal with this problem, and that's how we solve this problem. What will you do with the illegal migrants that arrive to the UK? What will you do with them? You've had 3 weeks to think of an answer. What is it?
And then Sir Keir Starmer fell into a familiar Corbyn-shaped trap.
The Prime Minister said he warned the country about Liz Truss and the damage that she was going to do to our economy. And then, in the next breath, he said we must unite behind her and support her. Why on earth would you unite behind someone that you say was going to do that damage?
You know what it's like to fall in behind a leader of your party.
But he's repeating the problem.
OK, well, I am joined again by the former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng and former Labour Minister Jeff Hoon as well. Now, one of the big topics that was coming up all throughout this debate was how are we going to pay for everything? How much is things going to cost? Are Labour being straight with you about taxes? And then a little bit earlier today, Darren Jones was caught out revealing what many people will believe to be the truth about Labour's tax bill when it comes to their green agenda. It was mentioned at this debate, but we do have a copy of this clip now, and then I will come to you guys off the back of it. So let's hear from him now. This is Darren Jones talking about how much is really going to cost for their big green agenda, the Labour Party. Go on.
We're still absolutely committed to it. It's still one of the top 5 priorities, and it's going to be a huge amount of effort to get there because people have to move quite quickly. But a lot of the coverage in the news was about that specific 28, which, because journalists made it sound as if we basically jumped the whole thing, but we definitely because some people would say that like 28 billion isn't enough. No, it's tiny. Like I've got people who work hundreds of billions of pounds. We need some more.
Hundreds of billions of pounds, he said. This is a bit awkward, I didn't realise this, but we can go now to Christopher Hope, who is with Darren Jones. So, Christopher, I'll leave you to it.
Patrick, I'm with Darren Jones, the Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury. Darren Jones, what on earth were you talking about in that secret recording?
Well, it wasn't a secret recording. It was a coffee morning in my constituency. The Tory party or the Telegraph are very welcome to come to. I was setting out what the private sector is going to invest in their own businesses in order to get to net zero by 2050 in, for example, the energy sector. It's based on independent evidence from the likes of the Committee on Climate Change, and it's also what the private sector and private sector investors tell us they want to do. There's no secret plan about unlocking investment in Britain. It is a promise from the Labour Party if we win the election next Thursday.
£28 billion was a tiny amount. You were recorded as saying you need hundreds of billions of pounds. Some of that is public subsidy. Are you not telling the whole truth about your green plan?
So I was pointing out that the 28 billion was small in contrast to the amount the private sector is going to invest in their own infrastructure, and we had to repackage that green prosperity plan because the Conservatives crashed the economy, debt went through the roof, the cost of debt went through the roof, and so we had to make it smaller. We've been very upfront and frank about that.
But even so, we heard there in the debate with Rishi Sunak asking Sir Keir Starmer, is it 200 billion, 300 billion? Is that all private money then? And there's no more public pennies apart from the money you've announced so far?
We've been very clear in the Labour Party what our fiscal rules are. We've been very clear about what our investments are. It's all in the manifesto and it's all fully funded and fully costed. All the additional money will have to come from the private sector. But if the private sector wants to own a nuclear power station or a hydrogen production site, or they want to build grid and network distribution facilities, then of course they will invest in it and pay for it.
We're worried that your leader, Sir Keir Starmer, was a bit all at sea when asked about how he'll deal with illegally arrived migrants. I think it was 8 or 9 times the Prime Minister said, what would you do? And there's no real answer from Sir Keir Starmer.
I mean, there was a very clear answer from Keir Starmer about how we would tackle the criminal gangs that are putting vulnerable people on boats and sending them to the UK, and the contrast with the Rwanda scheme, which is not even off the ground and would only deal with a very small number of the people who are coming. Keir Starmer has experience of prosecuting and closing down criminal gangs across Europe. He knows how to do this, whereas the Prime Minister seems to just want to be funding gimmicks and hoping for the best.
His point, though, was those who have arrived here. Rishi Sunak will say they'll be flown off to Rwanda, whereas what was the answer? What is the answer from Labour? Because there wasn't one in that debate.
Well, their applications need to be processed, and I think it's about 60% of asylum seekers don't get granted asylum, and then they have to return to where they came from. One of the problems we have at the moment is there's been such a backlog in the processing that there's a huge queue. People are stuck in hotels waiting for their decisions to come forward, and the Home Office has not been sending people home, even when they've said they don't have a right to be here. We have to fix that.
On welfare, he talked about, Rishi Sunak talked about surrendering on welfare. What's your plan? The Tories want to cut billions off the welfare bill, and Labour doesn't.
No, we do want to make sure that in the future the welfare bill is under control, because it is projected to be too high. We agree we want to reform the work capability assessments and a number of the way the processes work. But what the Conservatives have said is they're going to raise £12 billion from their reforms. But the Conservative Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, said that they've already raised that money and spent it. But that's the money apparently paying for the Conservative Party manifesto. What that means is their manifesto is not funded and they can't spend the money twice.
Why does Sir Keir Starmer ask twice for to be allowed to be heard? Was he a bit off colour today? He was a bit tired from the campaign?
No, I just think Rishi Sunak actually wasn't behaving very well. And I think if you look at both of them, Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, only one of them is going to be Prime Minister after the election next Thursday. It was very clear to me who was the most Prime Ministerial, both in terms of their leadership style, the answers to the questions, their plan for the country. I think Keir Starmer won that hands down, but people will only get that change if they vote for it next Thursday.
Well, Darren Jones there, who's the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, or the Deputy Chancellor in layman's terms, speaking to us there. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, lovely. So what timing, eh? What timing that was. Fantastic, Christopher. Thank you very much. You'll be grabbing more people for us. Right, as you know, I have got my wonderful studio audience here. I've also got 2 esteemed guests, former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng and Jeff Hoon as well, former Labour Minister. On that issue there, did Darren Jones let the cat out the bag that a Labour government is coming for your money?
I'm going to be very fair, OK? Because I was Secretary of State for BEIS. Before I was Chancellor, I was the Energy Secretary. And it's quite true that billions can be deployed by the private sector. And, of course, some of that money comes from the government, but it crowds in, it attracts more investment from the private sector. So what he said was broadly right. The fear is that they're going to actually put taxes up, and they're going to put more money, they're going to bet winners on the green eco-transition, and that won't be managed well. But I think what he said broadly is right. It's not hundreds of billions that's going to come from the government. And I think we've got to be fair. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, you know, I don't like Yahoo politics, even though I can give it as much as I can take it. But actually what he said was broadly right. The fear is that with Corbyn in 2019, he said he was going to nationalise everything. He's going to nationalise all the utilities, nationalise all the wind farms, and they're going to spend billions and billions and billions, which we can't afford, driving the transition.
Go on.
And what is crucial, in the spirit of even-handedness, is that we stabilise the economy, we allow investment to flow, because investment will not come into the UK for any purpose, green policies or anything, unless they believe that their investment will give them a return.
Okay, can I just ask you, Jeff?
And that means stability.
Yeah, but on Great British Energy, at the moment, they are saying that they are not saying, sorry, whether or not they are actually going to be using public money to build new things that will add to our grid. Instead, we might just be paying for things that already exist, that buying them off a private company. They can't answer that. What's the point of that?
The point of that is to ensure energy security.
But it's the same as we've got now. You're just buying it off some bloke over there.
No. vitally important that in the next phase of our energy requirements as a country, as we decarbonise, we ensure that this country is able to generate its electricity for its own needs. At the moment, we are hugely dependent on foreign sources of power, and we need to have a mechanism whereby the country can control that development. And that means green energy for the future. We're all committed to that. All political parties are committed to that, but it needs to be directed centrally.
OK.
So the main critique I have about that, and I agree with pretty much everything you said, is that if you look at the Labour policy, they're going to tax the North Sea. You know, they've openly said they want to shut down gas and fossil fuels in the North Sea. And all that will mean is that we'll be importing it from abroad at a higher price.
But we're already doing that.
We're doing it to an extent. But if you follow the logic, and I don't know where you stand on this, but if you follow the logic of people in the Labour Party and with the Green Wing, they want to get rid of fossil fuels entirely. And by doing that, they will not only crush jobs in the North Sea, they will also hike up energy prices through importing abroad.
There is a fundamental weakness in that argument, and it's this. The oil that comes from the North Sea is not necessarily coming to the UK. It's simply part of a global market in oil. And we can't make those oil companies sell their oil in the UK.
I agree with that, but if you look at gas, that's a different story. A lot of the gas that we consume comes from the North Sea. I think it was about 50% last time I saw.
And a lot comes from the Middle East.
It does. But if 50% is coming from, and you shut that down, you can see you're more dependent at a higher cost from abroad, and that's a risk. I don't know where you stand on it. I don't really know where the Labour shadow government stand on it, but there are elements in the party that want to shut the whole thing down.
OK, right, now, when we dip back in, I will come to my friend on the front row here for a question. I am just going to whiz us over to Christopher Hope now, who has Daisy Cooper with him, I think, our political editor in the spin room. Go on, Christopher.
Hi, Patrick. Yeah, I'm with Daisy Cooper, who's the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats. Daisy Cooper, what's it like watching that as a third party?
Well, to be honest, it was really frustrating. I obviously would have loved to have seen Ed Davey on the stage talking about our plans to save the NHS and social care, take real action on the cost of living and protect our local environment by putting a ban on ending, basically, the scandal of raw sewage dumping. We didn't hear enough about any of those three issues from the two politicians who were on the stage, and I think the public would have enjoyed seeing Ed on the stage this evening.
That language saying surrender, that was the attack line, wasn't it, from Rishi Sunak? Don't surrender on taxation, surrender on welfare, surrender on the borders. Why was that word surrender used so much by the Tory party?
I think it's simply a sign that the Prime Minister knows that he's on a losing streak and that this is a very desperate Prime Minister in a desperate situation. They've been mired in more sleaze and scandal. Every single day now we're getting more and more stories of that type. It's a Prime Minister fighting for his political life, and I think he knows, and you can tell from the audience this evening, that the public would just stick to the back teeth of this Conservative government, and it's time for them to go.
How are you feeling about the polling? Because the polling from Electoral Calculus for GBNews tonight has you at 71 MPs. You'll be the second biggest party in Parliament next Friday. You'll be the deputy leader of the opposition, Daisy Cooper.
I have seen polls go up and I've seen polls go down. And what I can tell you is that the only vote that matters, the only poll that matters, is the poll
It's a really boring answer. Come on, it's 10 o'clock at night. You and me talking. What's going on here? Do you think you can get this?
Do you know what? As a Liberal Democrat, I've seen our polls go up and down all over the time. But we have a voting system called First Past the Post. And actually, the polls don't always reflect what's happening on a seat-by-seat basis. What I can tell you is that Liberal Democrats are in second place to the Conservatives in around 80 seats around the country, and we're hoping to win as many of those as possible next Thursday.
And are you trying to take the votes from Labour as well, or mainly folk targeting the Tory party?
Well, as I say, we're in second place to the Conservatives in around 80 seats around the country. We are fighting Labour and the SNP in some seats around the country, but primarily it's Conservative MPs that we're trying to unseat.
Daisy Cooper, thank you for that. That's the Deputy Leader of the Lib Dems, Daisy Cooper, who this time next Friday, forgive me, could be in a different place altogether, according to these polls.
Yeah, 100%. Actually, look, Christopher, thank you very much, Daisy. This ties us on perfectly now to my next audience question. We mentioned the polling there. It has Labour, the latest polls are this, it has Labour winning 450 150 seats. The Lib Dems securing more MPs than the Tories. Ed Davey's party would be on 71 seats. The Conservatives will be down to just 60. Then comes the SNP on 24, but the poll also projects that Reform will win 18 seats, which is astonishing considering I think it was only last week they were on for 1 or 2 maybe. The Greens and Plaid Cymru have 4 each. And I do whiz us over now, so the chap has been waiting very patiently for me there. Now, sir, I think we were in that room earlier and one of the loudest cheers went up from yourselves and also from the audience when a bloke stood up basically and said to both of the candidates there that he didn't think particularly highly of them.
I actually agree with that gentleman, actually. I mean, to have a debate just with these two muppets, I feel that they are, that I would have liked to have seen a lot more leaders from different parties, because we live in a free democracy, and it's not free democracy when you only got two people. When we've got, you know, whether you agree with parties or different parties, it's nice to hear different opinions from everybody, not just from two men.
OK, so you would have more people.
I would have had a lot. I would have liked to have seen a lot more, wherever they are, of their the leaders from.
From different parties. Kwasi,
so look,
go on, yeah.
We had debates with 7... They weren't all leaders, but they're the 7-way debates. And if that were possible, they were even duller than the debate we've just seen. I mean, there was no thread, there was not... It was very incoherent. I get your point. I think that and we're going to see next week some of the anomalies of first past the post. Because you're going to get a Labour Party... I don't think they'll get much more than 40%. But if the polls are to be believed, they'll get a huge majority. And that's largely because... The other parties are very split, particularly the Conservative and Reform. And I'm old enough just to remember the 1983 general election, which was, in a way, like this in reverse, in that you had the Conservatives were on about 44%. You had Labour and the SDP on about 25%. And they effectively split their vote. And the Tories had a huge majority. And so you're going to see, you're going to see odd results. And that's just a feature of the system. Now, we can have a debate about first past the post, but we've all lived under it all our lives. We've had it for a very long time, and that's just the way
I do think there is a general mood, I think, that maybe these two leaders are not great and that there is massive dissatisfaction generally in the country, I think. And I wonder, Jeff, whether or not you think that's behind Nigel Farage's potential success. Well, what do you make of the fact the nation might be being made to choose, really, between two leaders of two major parties that we just don't like very much?
That's certainly not been my experience on the doorstep. I've had a lot of people say that actually we need a period of stability. We've had a period in which we've had a series of Conservative Prime Ministers, 2 of them resigning in disgrace within a matter of weeks, and Rishi Sunak trying to pretend somehow that he's something new and different, whereas actually he's simply continuing with the kinds of Conservative policies we've seen for very many years. So in those circumstances, people are looking for stability. They're looking for the kind of calm assurance, which I think Keir Starmer demonstrated over and over again tonight when he was answering the questions rather than simply mouthing slogans.
So, look, I'm going to speak freely, OK? I mean, you stuck to your party talking points. Neither of these leaders are inspiring huge confidence. And we've got to be honest about that. I mean, in 97, Blair got 44%. Keir is trending down. And he's got a problem. And I think Rishi Sunak, as you say, actually was 3 prime ministers who resigned. I mean, whether in disgrace or not, that's your little spin, your literary spin on it. But yeah, we have had a tumultuous time. I think Rishi deserves some credit in stabilising the situation. And, you know, it's difficult. After 14 years, you could have the most charismatic leader in the world, and it's very difficult to make the case that we need another 5 years. And I think Rishi's doing a reasonable job. But we've got to be frank and say, you know, both main leaders are struggling. And we haven't mentioned Reform once, even though they've doubled pretty much their vote share in the last 4 weeks. And I think that was the elephant in the room, actually. And we've got to be candid and open and say, why is this happening? We can't just go on with the talking points over on the doorstep, you know, people are loving Keir Starmer. They're not. And we've got to be frank about that.
OK. You were mentioning there about a lack of stability and about, you know, chaos, etc. With respect, do you...
I was part of it. I was in it. I mean, I saw all of it. And I wish it hadn't happened. I mean, we were being buffeted around. and we needed a period of stability and calm. And looking back, I can see that that was a difficult
You fundamentally
time.
feel like you had the rug pulled from under you, right?
Well, effectively. I mean, I've talked about it a lot. But, you know, when you... I mean, and you don't have to be a great student of political history to know when a Prime Minister sacks the Chancellor, they've effectively blown themselves up.
Yeah. And 6 days later, she resigned.
6 days. And I said to her, I said, you've got 3 weeks. And I was wrong. It was 6 days, as you pointed out. But that was unfortunate, and we move on. But I definitely think that Rishi has tried to hold Labour's feet to the fire on tax. And I think what he says is basically right.
OK, and I put it to you that maybe this idea of Tory chaos and what happened with Liz Truss and Kwasi, etc., is maybe slightly overblown. It's just simply a useful attack line.
I don't accept that for a moment. I'll tell you for why, Patrick, because I spent a lot of time the last few weeks knocking on doors in different parts of the country. And I'm afraid Liz Truss and Kwasi's budget come through. Now, I know from knocking on doors over a lifetime that actually it is very rare for people to mention specific issues of that kind. But they're mentioning it because they're suffering. Their mortgage has gone up, it's stayed up, they're struggling financially, they do not see any prospect for growth or success under the present Conservative leadership, and they want change.
So that would be all very well if Labour's vote share wasn't actually declining. That's what's been happening. If that were true, you'd expect there to be increasing support. They're not. The people who are increasing support, actually, if you just look at the numbers, are minority parties, the Liberal Democrats, to a certain extent, the Greens, and particularly Reform. And I think, yes, it's true, I take responsibility. There is an element of the mini-budget, but there's a whole bunch of other things. Yeah. And actually, there's a lot of discontent. And it's very interesting to hear Jeff say, oh, Starmer, people are loving Starmer, they want to change. They're not. They're dissatisfied with a lot of politics, and we've got to address that. We've got to be honest about that. And I don't know what... If you've got a peerage, you've already got one. I mean, you're done. but we've got to be frank about the problems.
OK, all right, now we're going to whiz it back. I have got a live studio audience in here. Again, if you're just joining us, we're not having some kind of mad party. We were watching this head-to-head. I'll play you a couple of clips of that again in a second, but I'll come to this wonderful chap here. What is it you would like... Yeah, talking to the microphone. What is it you want to say?
Why should the country trust Labour and Conservative on defence when during 13 years of a Labour government and now almost 14 years of a Conservative government, you have systematically weakened the British armed forces to the point that today the nominal number is 73,000 and the actual number is 40,000 of people capable to fight. Russia deployed 250,000 in the first weeks in Ukraine, and they are now deployed 700,000. The great absent in the room, the great elephant absent in this political campaign is defense. Not Labour, not Conservative have mentioned defense at any point in time. And you have also ignored geopolitical issues when just a few weeks ago a by-election was won on geopolitical issues. Okay. Why you continue to ignore defense and why Labour opposed national service?
Oh, all right, OK. Thank you. I will take the microphone. But, yes, OK. Well, I'll finish with that one, then. Well, why are Labour opposing national service?
Well, the people who will be most against the Conservative plans for national service are the armed forces. They simply do not want to spend their time looking after people who will only serve on a weekend. I spent 6 years as Secretary of State for Defence. I promise you that whenever the issue of national service was raised, the people who were most against it were the military.
Right, go on.
I think that is true, but actually what he's talking about national service, when Rishi mentioned it, it's not just about military service. It's a broader offer, as we have we see in other European countries. So I think you're partially right, but it's not just about people being in the military.
OK.
The national service idea.
Now, again, I am just getting something in my ear here. We remember the chap who asked the question about them both being useless. I think we'll just remind ourselves of who he was.
Mr Sunak, I think you made a fair job of being Chancellor, but you're a pretty mediocre Prime Minister. Sir Keir, I think that your strings are being pulled by very senior members of the Labour Party. Are you two really the best we've got to be the next Prime Minister of our great country?
And I believe that man there, who's someone in my audience that should be given a knighthood, joins Christopher Hope now. There he is. Come on, Christopher, take it away. He's getting a round of applause.
Patrick, with me now is Robert Blackstock, who asked the question of the evening. Robert, you're having a round of applause from the audience at GB News for that question. What prompted it?
Well, it's a question I've wanted to ask, and I didn't think I was going to get the attention that I've subsequently got. Because it's a question that I think a lot of people across our wonderful country have been wanting to ask as well. So I've just asked the obvious question.
And when you said you said our great country, and it is a great country. Of course it is. And do you feel that the political class isn't measuring up to how great this country is?
Very definitely. I don't think we have a charismatic enough leadership to lead our great country.
Can I ask you, sir, how you voted in previous elections? Were you a Tory voter in 2019? Was Boris Johnson your guy then?
Yes, I was a Tory voter then, and I voted for Brexit as well. And but this year and next week, I'm still very much undecided, because I don't think tonight it was a really great experience for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I don't think it's answered a lot of questions, and talking to other people in the audience, I don't think it's answered their questions either.
Who do you think won, Mr. Blackstock?
That's a really difficult one, because I don't think either of them answered the questions properly. Even when they were batting the questions backwards and forwards across themselves, they weren't answering the questions. So I would say it was probably a draw as to who won. I don't think either. I think if you gauge the audience response on some of the questions, Mr. Sunak certainly got a bigger applause than Sir Keir.
Mr. Blackstock, you used to work in a machine parts factory. You sold machine parts.
Engineering, yes.
Engineering. Do you think you could do a better job than Sir Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak?
Probably not. But they've had years of wanting to do that. I wanted to do the job I did and thoroughly enjoyed it. So if they're doing the job that they're doing, they should be doing a good job as well.
And before we go, Mr. Blackstock, please hold up the question you asked for the viewers at home. So there you have it. The question, Patrick, which I think got most of the country cheering from their sofas, from Robert Blackstock.
Robert Blackstock, a hero is born tonight. That debate there. Thank you very much, Christopher, and thank you very, very much, Robert. I'm going to whiz us back over now to my live audience here. I believe you have a question, sir, for Kwasi Kwarteng and Jeff Hoondy.
Yeah, so my question relates to immigration, and I just don't know what this adversity is towards getting out of the ECHR. We've got a revered Supreme Court Justice, Lord Sumption, who believes that it's outdated, it's not fit for purpose. The mass migration experiment, just look to Sweden. Malmo has now been ranked as dangerous as Baghdad. There's a national security threat. We need urgent action on this. I do think the Rwanda plan as a deterrent is good. Keir says that he wants to work with European partners. Look how good it's working in France. They're still coming over left, right, and centre. So, you know, what party... This is why you're hemorrhaging support to reform, because you don't want to go through the ECHR. And Canada, Singapore, Australia, USA, they're all liberal democracies. They're not part of the ECHR.
OK. Can I get a quick show of hands in this room, please? Who would get us out of the ECHR? Is there a strong feeling to leave these? It's a majority. Yeah, there's a couple more gone up as well as peer pressure there. But yes, OK, all right. So I would say a vast majority of people in this room, from what I can see there, we're up for leaving the ECHR. Go on, Kwasi.
Look, I agree with your analysis. I mean, Jeff has talked about the economy, and they talked a lot about the tax issue. What's in constituencies like my former constituency, what's killing the Conservative Party, and you see it in these polls, is this immigration issue. You know, Reform aren't campaigning on tax. They don't mention. I don't think they've ever mentioned. Well, barely.
Well, a bit,
but not much. And this is a big issue. And I think the problem that we've had is that the ECHR, Rishi Sunak recognises that on this issue, the Conservative Party is very split. Now, and this reminds me of actually John Major in the 90s on Europe. And at some point, he's going to have to. Well, let's see what happens next week. But whoever is the leader of the Conservative Party is going to have to make a call on that. And that's the difficulty we're in.
OK. Jeff, can Labour really be trusted to stop the boats, do you think?
Of course, and the reality is that the deterrent that has been talked about does not work. It has not stopped anyone coming to this country. 50,000 people have arrived under Rishi Sunak's premiership. There's no evidence that those people sitting there in France waiting are going to be deterred by the prospect of a handful going to Rwanda. And it is a handful. And what was interesting about the debate tonight was that when pressed, he couldn't actually say that everyone is going to Rwanda. There's only going to be a small number on each flight. Will not get anywhere near the 50,000 and the more that will follow. So the reality is that policy, which is costing every taxpayer enormous amounts of money, is not working.
One of the other iconic moments of that was that Keir Starmer was asked by Rishi Sunak if he was going to sit down and negotiate.
Yeah, that was the funniest. That was the funniest moment in the whole debate.
You're saying where's he going to send them? That's on that, isn't it?
Ask yourself this question then. Where are the 50,000? I'll tell you where they are. They're in hotels up and down this country being paid for by taxpayers. Why? Why? I'll tell you why. Because the Conservative government...
He said, what do you do with them? He said, what do you do with them?
Let me finish this point. Quite deliberately have stopped the process of putting those people in front of immigration judges to determine whether or not they are asylum seekers. No, but this is important. By stopping that process, we are all paying as taxpayers for those people to live in hotels.
But that was
an absurd policy.
Look, I think Rishi Sunak's strongest point in the debate was that point about the Ayatollahs. I mean, the idea that if you're not going to send them to Rwanda, you're going to sit down with the Taliban and return these people to Afghanistan in a kind of ordered process is absurd.
You would only return them under the law if they are found to be economic migrants and not genuine asylum seekers. That's the law. Okay. It's been the law under the Conservatives as much as under Labour.
That's
the reality is the reason why the Conservative government has slowed down the processing of people coming here illegally is because they are afraid of the numbers that would then be found to be entitled to asylum.
I can't help but wonder if one of the big problems for Labour is that they don't appear to be afraid of the numbers that will be allowed to stay.
No, that's not the position. We've made quite clear that it is necessary to have a more vigorous system.
OK. All right, my friend over there, go on.
So Keir Starmer says he's going to use the courts to close down the criminal gangs, but surely just looking at the war on drugs for the last 50 years, where there's money, there is no chance in shutting these people down. So without an actual deterrent, it's just not going to work, is it?
Well, there is a successful war on drugs carried out by the police. There are
you go to any pub in the UK and it'll tell you a different story.
Well,
I can point to some in my former constituency.
I thought you were going to say your bag then for a second.
The question was about gangs, and gangs have been dealt with in large parts of the country. They're not dealt with 100% inevitably, but they are being dealt with. And if you have criticism, it's criticism of the police, not of any other institution.
No, because for every gang that gets shut down, another one springs up. There's so much money involved that they're just not going to shut it down. And it's the same with the immigration.
Sir, I agree. I thought that showed a bit of naivety. I mean, you mentioned Malmo. I mean, the situation there is appalling. And the idea that you're going to somehow through the courts shut this down, I think, is not right. I think it's a much bigger problem than can be dealt with just by going through sort of legal process in each individual case. You've got to change the policy. And actually, what Jeff says is right. I mean, everything that we point out that we could be improved, he's going to say, well, you had 14 years to deal with it, and that's I get that. But I think the situations change, and we need to be more aggressive and focused on this.
OK, great stuff. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So thank you very much, everybody who's asked questions so far. This is really what we're all about here, so this is great. I'm going to whiz us back over to Christopher Hope, who I believe has a fellow Patrick with him. It remains to be seen if he's as handsome, of course. But, Christopher, who have you got? What's going on?
Hi, Patrick. With me now is Patrick English from YouGov, who will tell us who's won. Patrick English, who won that debate?
So we've polled 1,700 debate watchers, and they've given us a perfectly split decision. 50% said that Rishi Sunak won, 50% said that Keir Starmer won. Now, what is interesting is that pre-debate, that same sample expected Keir Starmer to win by a margin of 2-1. So Sunak has outperformed expectations, but is it a killer blow to change the election at 50-50? Probably not.
But he certainly came out of the traps in a way which we haven't seen that from Rishi Sunak, have we, recently? And Keir Starmer didn't really have an answer. He kept asking for silence a couple of times.
Certainly Rishi Sunak was a better performer than in the last debate we saw. He came out very punchy. Perhaps that did surprise Keir Starmer, and it certainly went against the expectations to an extent to some of our debate watchers. But even within that number, nearly 20% of debate watchers who voted Conservative in 2019 said that Starmer won. So even beneath what looks like quite encouraging news for Sunak, there are still some troubling stories.
There's a long way to go, and now week 6 starts tonight, doesn't it, in this election campaign? I wonder where Sunak's been for so long, that kind of anger, and the question to Starmer, what would you do on small boat, asked 9 times, wasn't answered, was it? I mean, these kind of debating points work, but will they cut through to the bottom line, the actual election day?
Well, the debate watchers also told us that Sunak won on the issue of immigration, and probably a lot to do with the way that he was able to pin Keir Starmer down through a lot of that debate. Also on tax, that was another area where Sunak, the debate watchers said, did better. But on some other issues, the economy, for example, at large, Keir Starmer did better. He also, according to our debate watchers, came across as more likeable. Yes. So there are things I think that both men can look at in this data and say, well, this is good news, we've won here and we've won there, and then overall it coalesces into that perfectly split ballot 50-50.
Did you find Rishi Sunak being too aggressive, too shouty? And maybe that worked against him. It worked in the room here. We certainly felt that Sir Keir Starmer looked a bit more sleepy than him, really. But did it matter?
Well, being quite aggressive and combative certainly can give a certain edge within a debate, but it really does turn off the public. We know from our polling that what the public really want above all else from these debates and from their politicians is answers. And when there is quite a lot of shouting and cutting across, they don't really like that because they don't feel like they're getting answered. And the one word we asked the debate watching public to describe this debate in one word, and the one that came back to us was frustrating. And I think that's got a lot to do with it.
Do you think that questioner, Robert Blackstock, spoke for the UK? He asked, why are you this bunch of mediocre politicians are running this country?
I certainly think that a lot of the public think this is a frustrating election. You know, they have a choice, really, what they're telling us, between two parties, two leaders, neither of whom are popular, but however, in relative speaking, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are significantly more popular than the Conservatives. So maybe a none of the above election, maybe a no election, but certainly not one where there's a very popular party or a very popular leader facing off against an unpopular one.
Patrick English there from YouGov. I was reminded earlier, Martin Baxter from Electoral Calculus said this is the oh no election, Patrick, and it seems that might be about right.
Oh, good stuff. Yet again, Christopher, thank you very, very much. Now, one of the key flashpoints from tonight was the debate about gender and about women's spaces. I'm going to play a little clip from this, and we're going to take a question from our audience, and my 2 esteemed guests are going to have to answer it. So here we go.
Changing the law so that the Equalities Act recognises that sex means biological sex, and that will allow us to deliver on what Vicky wants, which is to protect female-only spaces, female-only services. It's crystal clear for you there is a choice on that question at this election, because Keir Starmer is not matched my pledge to reform the Equalities Act to pass new law. That is the only way to deliver on what Vicky says. And the reason he won't do that, I don't know, but he can explain, is because he's not sure, like I am, that when it comes to these matters, sex means biological sex, and that's how you protect female-only spaces and services.
OK, my friend on the front row here, I believe you've got a question relating to that, have you?
Yeah. I thought Rishi Sunak answered that correctly, and I would support him. I got several doubts about Keir Starmer. He's leading a party which has never had a female leader. I think in his election process, he beat 5 women. And they also had to bring in woman-only shortlist. So really, to nominate the MPs. So really, can he really have the authority to say no about women when there could be a problem in the party? Is there a problem in the party?
OK. Do you think Keir Starmer's got a woman problem?
I think there's every prospect of there being a woman leader of the Labour Party, and if you think back over Labour's history, it's Labour that introduced the Equal Pay Act, it's Labour that introduced the Sex Discrimination Act, both incidentally opposed by Conservatives at the time. So the reality is that it is Labour that has protected and enhanced and supported the rights of women.
So if Labour is so pro-women, why have the Conservatives had 3 female Prime Ministers and Labour had 0?
I think that's a really good question. I do not know the answer to it.
Okay.
But the reality is that we need to do better.
What about changing rooms now? What about women's spaces now, OK? What about the fact that, as it currently stands, it appears that under a Labour government, we might have gender ideology reintroduced again in schools, and it easier for adults to change their gender, and that really does, I think, mean that we're probably going to get more men in women's changing rooms. Is that not a problem for Keir Starmer?
It's not a problem for Keir Starmer. It is a problem.
Or his wife, most probably.
We do not want a situation. We do not want a situation clearly where men can pretend to be women in order to gain access to safe spaces where women are properly protected. That's the harm that this whole debate is really addressed at. And what we need to ensure is that women have safe spaces, whilst at the same time recognising there are a small number of people whose gender is not clear even at birth. There are a small number of people who psychologically, at a certain stage in their lives, change. In those circumstances, we need to have some sensitivity about this debate. It is not a debate where we should be sloganising.
OK, so look, I mean, I'm going to be much more simplistic. I sort of agree with what you're saying, but clearly what Keir is doing is chasing what he thinks, where he thinks popular opinion is. So, you know, when he bent the knee...
Rishi Sunak's not?
No, but on this issue, yeah, clearly. I mean, they're being very political. You know, when Black Lives Matter came in, Keir and Angela Rayner took the knee. OK, that became less fashionable, and then he was pro-trans rights. And then now he decides that Tony Blair's right when he says that a man has a penis and a woman has a vagina. You know, he's been shifting around. I totally get that. He's a clever politician. But as Rishi said, there isn't any conviction in any of those positions.
OK, great stuff. I think we're going to play you a clip now from Sir Keir Starmer earlier on, and it's on tax. Let's hear it.
We have set out in our manifesto all of our plans. They're fully funded, they're fully costed, and we've set out that we will not be increasing income tax, national insurance or VAT. What the Prime Minister is doing, he's got a manifesto that's got promises to you and everybody watching which are unfunded, because his Chancellor has said that the money he's relying on has already been spent.
Fine, and just before we go to my panel on this, does anyone know what Keir Starmer's dad did? Anyone?
Work is, of course, about pay and being able to pay your own way and, you know, support your family, but it is also about dignity and respect. And my dad worked in a factory all his life. He was a tool maker, and having a secure job for him was really important to his respect and integrity.
His dad was a... There it is, every single time. There we are. But look, on the issue of tax, they're saying that the Tories' plans are unfunded. The Tories are saying Labour's plans are unfunded as well. One of the key flashpoints for me was on pensioners, though, and I would like a quick comment from each of you on this. What Rishi Sunak was trying to get Keir Starmer to say was that he is going to tax pensioners. He was saying there's going to be a retirement tax. Keir Starmer didn't rule that out, Jeff.
That's not the way the debate has developed. The reality is that the Conservatives made a promise that they cannot pay for in relation to pensions. And Keir Starmer was quite clear in saying that we, the Labour Party, would maintain the budgetary policy set out by this Conservative government. And I remind you, Patrick, that when we won the election in 1997, we kept the previous spending plans of the previous Conservative government. And I anticipate that that will be something which Labour will do, because it allows time for stability, it allows time to think through what is then necessary.
OK, all right. A quasi-ageing population, we are going to end up with more people of pension age. Do they have something to fear from Keir Starmer?
I think that Rishi's question was a good one, and he's clearly trying to shape the triple lock and the triple lock plus.
And how's he going to pay for it? How's he going to pay for it?
Well, he says he's going to do welfare reform and a bunch of spending restraint. That's always the difficult bit. But what he said, his fundamental point, I think, is right. Labour will come in and they will put up taxes. And actually, the IFS said if the Tories come in, they'll put up taxes. Because the fundamental problem of the country is that we're not growing the economy. As this gentleman pointed out earlier, we're not growing the economy fast enough. So if we can't grow the economy, doesn't matter who's in power, they're going to try and put up taxes.
And that's why the Labour
and they're not being honest about that.
And that's why Labour's manifesto emphasises over and over again the necessity for growth.
Yeah,
because
that's true.
if we had the kinds of levels of growth that we had under the last Labour government, we would be in a much better position to finance the public services.
I agree with you. I mean, that was one of the, I was involved with that, Liz Truss. I mean, that was the fundamental problem. Now, you can say the execution was a dog's breakfast, but the fundamental problem remains the same. And I'm glad that Labour have come round to that. And I would like to hear our government say more about that.
Okay.
As well.
All right, so just, chaps, that's a good point for us to just draw a line under that for now. And just to remind everyone, if you didn't already know, we are going to be in Essex. I'm going to be in Essex. Fantastic. On election night, as Michelle Dewberry and me, Patrick Christys, host our GB News exclusive election night coverage. So if you want to be a part of our exclusive live audience in Essex, you can apply now by either scanning a QR code that I believe is on your screens at the moment, or if you're listening on radio, just go to GBNews.com and you'll see it on there. So it's quite straightforward, really. Do come and be a part of it. It's all going to be a good laugh, actually. I know some of the people that we've got booked in for it, and it is going to be fantastic. But coming up next, I'll whiz you through the very first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages as well, so you'll be bang up to date with all of that. We're joined by tonight's panel of top pundits. This is Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So there was a calf that was run down by a Surrey police car. It's now being nursed back to health, according to the family who own the farm that the calf escaped from.
Well, he didn't just run him over once, he ran him over twice.
No, we're not showing you the footage. The footage is really shocking. But the police officer who was driving this vehicle has now been taken off frontline duties until a full investigation is completed. And I feel like I'm yet again the only person in the country who thinks the police officer was just doing his job. That police officer, probably a young guy who's got dual carriageways left, right and centre in that area. Do you know what the most popular business is in that area in Feltham?
Farming.
McDonald's drive-through. It's got a queue round the block anytime you go around that area. And all those people queuing for McDonald's who are now outraged that this poor cow had to die.
Because it's going to be at McDonald's at some point.
At some point it was going to die. I'm really sorry. If you eat meat, you can't be upset by a cow dying. I think the fast roads with cars at 10 o'clock at night in the dark, they're not expecting a cow to walk out in the middle of the night. There would have been a massive pile-up. Then there'd been, like, who knows how many people dead. And then the police would have been criticised for not neutralising the threat.
The thing is, it was because he did... why... You could see the first time, the calf could barely stand up. I just don't get why I had to then go and do it a second time.
Well, I suppose at that point it's a bit like if you run over like a deer on the side of the road, you know, and if the police they're going to kill the animal to put it out of its misery. That's all I can presume. And the guy's not trained. This is Feltham. It isn't Texas. He's not going to come out with a lasso. He doesn't know what to do.
Where did this happen, Feltham?
Feltham. I'm sure the inbox is now going to be full of people saying, "Bev, you're outrageous. You lack compassion."
No, there will be people who agree with you. But if it had been done once, that was enough. But I don't think it needed to do it the second time.
GB News, the People's Channel.
All right, welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Now it's time to bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Let's do it. All right, start with the Metro. Aristocrat guilty over secret birth. Yeah, devastating story, this. She and partner facing a new trial now, though, over the baby's death. That is the aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner have been found guilty of hiding the birth of their baby. In that case that about a year or so ago now did grip the nation, didn't it? For all the wrong reasons. I'm going to whiz us over to the Eye. Revealed. Russian hackers behind NHS attack are part of cyber army protected by the Kremlin. It's got it all, that headline, hasn't it? Hackers using Russian servers are working under Moscow's protection to carry out attacks on things like our NHS. Let's go to the Independent. Starmer squares up to striking doctors. He says, I won't give you 35%. I think we might talk about this in a second. As junior doctors stage latest 5-day walkout, which I think starts tomorrow, actually. Yeah, Starmer's saying he's not going to give in to their pay demands. Let's whiz us over to the Daily Mirror. Holly kidnap kit. This is a story in relation to Holly Willoughby and this alleged monster, I suppose you would call him, who wanted to, according to the courts, murder and commit other vile acts towards her. I'm just going to wrap us off for this one now with the Daily Mail. You are taking people for fools. Rishi's furious blast at Keir Starmer. Sunak slams Labour leaders' nonsensical plans to tackle illegal migration. And he kept using the word surrender at this debate, telling voters not to surrender our borders or indeed anything else to Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party. That's the bulk of your front pages for tomorrow. I'm still joined in the studio by our wonderful live studio audience. I'm also going to, you'll see Kwasi still here for us. We've got Adam Brooks on the end. We've also got Rebecca Reid here. Can I just start on what was in The Independent? Because I sense that this is going to be leading a lot of the news agenda tomorrow. These are obviously tomorrow's front pages. The doctors' strike, I think, is upon us, or will be at midnight. Starmer saying he's not going to give in to 35%. Rebecca, I'll just bring you in on this. He's got a massive issue, hasn't he, Starmer? How does he get to grips with the unions?
I think he's got a better situation than Rishi does because he's got a fresh start. And I think there's a lot of bad blood. The negotiations have been going on for what feels like forever. And I think at this point, Keir may be able to get away with giving less simply because he's not Rishi. And I hope that happens because I'd like everybody to not have appointments.
Yeah, would that not, Adam, and then I'll come to you, Kwasi, would that not indicate that maybe these strikes have been political all along?
Of course I have. Scottish junior doctors settled, I think, around 12%. Now, why haven't they done that with our government? Because they've come in at 35% and priced themselves out of negotiations. I think, you know, they've put a barrier up. Why should you negotiate with such greed? And at the end of the day, they're going to cost lives this weekend, like they have cost lives in previous strikes, and it's unforgivable.
Kwasi, I suppose one thing is true, which is that as it currently stands, the Conservative Party are incapable of getting around this.
I think this is purely political. I mean, 35%, think of it. I mean, on what planet, when inflation is now at 2%, would you ask for a 35% pay rise? That's not realistic. I think they're setting up a political tussle, and if Labour get in, it'll be their problem. But it wouldn't surprise me if they settled for, like, a lot less than 35%.
I mean, they haven't had a pay rise they haven't had a significant pay rise for a long time.
But 35%.
They are now earning less than they were in, 2006 or something in real time.
Let's also remember they chose to go into a profession knowing the pay structure.
Yes, but they are paid much worse than they thought they were going to be when you take...
But 35%, I've never heard of such a thing.
No, absolutely,
I
think they are trying to course-correct for a very long time of not being given pay rises, in fairness. And also, if you are that important, if you are the most essential service, then you do have a very powerful negotiation tool.
To me,
maybe we should pay them more because they're so important.
But the fact that they've started the strike now, a week before general election, strikes me as highly political.
I think some of the other timings of them were, I would argue, bang out of order, actually. I think we had some over Christmas, we've had some, you know, at peak times, right? And
but that's good negotiation, they're powerful. That's why these unions are powerful.
People are dying.
I'm not pleased about this weekend because of this strike. Just think of that.
I think it's very irresponsible.
People also lose their lives because of bad management within the NHS and also because the doctors are overworked, underpaid, stressed, often having to take on a lot of...
So you're justifying a 35%
No, I don't think 35, but I do think they probably could make a very good case for somewhere closer to 25, and I guess...
No chance.
I'm not an economist, but I think...
I don't mind saying this. I am being told that if I don't play you something involving Ed Davey, we all go to Ofcom prison. So here is something from the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey. I believe that he was asked about legalising cannabis. There we go.
On cannabis, a legally regulated market for cannabis, this document says, will this lead to cannabis-addled zombies roaming the streets?
We want to get rid of the very potent, health-damaging cannabis, the skunk is often called. We want to get it out.
Herbal's okay, but
so a regulator market, like they've done in many states in the United States, Canada, European countries, that's found to help young people, actually. It means that the resources can be put on the criminal gangs, these really nasty people selling their misery. We want to crack down on them. And that's a sensible, evidence-led way of doing it.
OK, very quickly, can I just get a little show of hands on who would legalise cannabis? 2, 3 people here, the rest of you, and the rest... Cancer treatment, so, all right, more nuanced view. So, OK, so not just a blanket legalisation. Would you?
Yes, I would, but as he says, not the sort of hydroponic strains that have links with schizophrenia.
Okay, fine. So you legalise...
Better quality, but if you legalise it, you can regulate it. So it should be better quality, properly grown, the kind of stuff that you would have been smoking in the 70s, not the stuff that you get on the street
What do you
now.
reckon? Is there a compelling case for how much we could gain in tax revenue?
No, I wouldn't legalise it. I mean, the fact that you've said that it's got to be nuanced, it'll be very difficult to police. You know, this is the good cannabis, that's the bad cannabis. I think it's just much easier.
I know a guy, Kwasi, I can see that.
All right.
I think it's just much easier to maintain the status quo.
Look, from experience, I've had several friends over the years growing up that were cannabis users, and they've got mental health issues. Some are bipolar. It's held them back from becoming successful in their lives.
That's true of alcohol too.
So it's not something that I would want to see. I've got 3 children. I'd be horrified if they become cannabis users. I think it stinks. I don't want our streets smelling of it.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
no, I'm against this.
It is everywhere, isn't it? I mean, that is another aspect. I mean, there's a lot of nodding in the audience there. It bothers you, does it? The walking around and the smell of it, I'll take it, yeah?
I mean, cigarettes smell pretty bad too, and alcohol is very bad for you and very bad for your mental health, etc. So there are lots of things that are bad
there's
for
a
us.
distinction there, isn't there? Because those things are now legal, and you would have to illegalise them.
Yeah, but
whereas cannabis is illegal, and you're saying we should legalise it, and I'm saying we shouldn't.
I mean, I think people should probably be allowed to ingest whatever they want within their choice.
And
but
it's also a starter drug for many
I
harder
totally agree with
drugs
that.
as well. So,
totally agree.
you know, you get used to cannabis, you want the next high.
I'm not sure that's necessarily true.
It's very true, trust
But
me.
it's interesting with Ed Davey, because he's trying to get noticed, and that's obviously a policy that is...
OK. Can I just say, thank you to everybody here, and I would like to say a massive thank you to you all for turning up, for giving up your evening, for being a part of it in our watch party, for being such an active part of this show. So genuinely, thank you so much, everybody. I'm back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Headliners are up next. Give yourselves a massive round of applause. Come on, well done.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following another hot day for many, it's warm overnight, but cooler air is on the way and windier weather. This unseasonably deep low pressure arriving for Thursday and Friday, that's going to bring some unseasonable strong winds to Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, it's not been hot everywhere during Wednesday, but for much of central and southeastern England, it has been another very warm or hot one, and it's going to stay warm in these areas overnight despite the clear spells, 17 Celsius. Further west and north, we've got showery rain moving in, cloud and an increased breeze. So by dawn, much more unsettled across parts of Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the winds picking up strength through the morning, bands of